I thought the fortune teller was just a quirky wedding weekend entertainment, a woman in a silk headscarf who smelled of sandalwood and told brides they'd have beautiful children. I had no idea that her warning, delivered in a voice so low and certain it cut straight through the noise of the bridal shower, would turn out to be the most accurate and devastating piece of advice anyone had ever given me, and that I would spend the next year wishing, with every fiber of my body, that I had listened to it. Let me be more precise about what she actually said, because the words matter. She took my hands, turned them palm up, looked for a long moment at the lines crossing my left hand, and then looked up at me with eyes that were completely still. "There is someone close to you," she said, "who smiles at your happiness but does not feel it. Do not invite your sister to your wedding." She said it the way you say the bridge is out ahead, not as a prophecy, not as a performance, but as a fact she was simply passing along. And then she moved on to the next bride-to-be, and the music in the next room got louder, and someone handed me a glass of champagne, and I laughed it off. My sister Naomi was my maid of honor. Her dress was already altered. The invitations had been sent 6 weeks ago. I laughed it off. That is the sentence I return to now, sitting on the porch of the house that is finally, legally, entirely mine. The house my grandmother left me, with its wide oak floors and its smell of cedar and old books. And I think about how thoroughly, how completely I laughed it off. My grandmother's name was Helen, and she had lived in this house for 51 years. She raised my mother here, and my mother raised Naomi and me in an apartment 12 blocks away, which meant that this house was the fixed point of our childhood, the place where Christmas always happened, where summers smelled of her garden, where the particular quality of afternoon light through the kitchen window meant safety and permanence and the best kind of boredom. When she died, 3 months before my wedding, she left the house to me. Not to my mother, not to Naomi, not divided, to me, specifically, in a will that was clear and witnessed and notarized and entirely unambiguous. She left it to me because I had spent every Saturday for 4 years driving her to her appointments, managing her medications, sitting with her through the long Sunday afternoons when the arthritis made everything difficult and the television felt like too much. She left it to me because I had been there, and she knew it, and she wanted me to know she knew. The ring came with the house. It had been her mother's, a thin gold band with a single oval sapphire, deep blue, almost indigo in certain lights. It was not an expensive ring by any modern measure, but it had a quality that expensive things rarely have, which is the quality of being irreplaceable. The sapphire had a small inclusion on one side, a tiny cloud of crystalline impurity that caught the light in a particular way. My grandmother used to say that the flaw was what made it alive. She wore it on her right hand for as long as I could remember, and when the hospice nurse finally slid it off her finger 3 days before she died and handed it to me in a small paper envelope, I put it in the cedar box on my dresser, and I kept it there, next to my own grandmother-given things, a silver hair clip, a photograph from 1987, a folded letter she had written me when I graduated from college. The ring was not in the will separately. It was simply understood, the way things that come from hands rather than lawyers are understood. My grandmother had shown it to me, explained its history, told me its name. She called it the blue one, which I always found funny, given that it was the only piece of jewelry she owned that could properly be called jewelry. "When I go," she said once, sitting in her kitchen with the afternoon light very warm on the tablecloth between us, "the blue one goes with the house." I had nodded. I had not thought to wonder whether anyone else had been told something different. I was engaged to Daniel by then. We had been together for 3 years, met at a work conference in Portland, stayed in touch across the distance for 6 months, and then made the slow, careful decision to build something together. He was a structural engineer, methodical and calm, the kind of man who fixed things before they broke and replaced batteries before the smoke alarm started beeping. I found his steadiness immensely comforting after years of more volatile relationships. And he found my ability to manage complexity, the spreadsheets, the logistics, the care of my grandmother, something he genuinely admired. We were good together. I believed that entirely and without reservation, right up until I stopped believing it. We got engaged in February. My grandmother died in March. The wedding was set for June. In the 4 weeks between the funeral and the bridal shower, Naomi was extraordinary. I want to say that because it is true, and because it makes what came later more comprehensible, not less. She handled the caterer, the florist, the seating chart revision. She called me every evening and let me cry without trying to fix it. She drove with me to the house, my house now, though I could not yet think of it that way, and helped me sort through rooms, holding things up to ask, keep or donate, in a voice that was gentle and careful. She knew the house the way I did, from childhood, and she moved through it with the same quiet reverence. Or so I thought. I know now that she moved through it with the methodical attention of someone taking inventory, but I did not know that then. Then I thought, I am lucky to have her. The bridal shower was at my friend Carrie's house, 12 women in a room that smelled of pink peonies and Prosecco. The fortune teller was Carrie's idea, a woman named Sylvia, mid-60s, with deep-set eyes and a quality of absolute stillness that made the room go quieter whenever she spoke. She went around the table, reading palms, saying things that were sometimes specific and sometimes general, and occasionally, in the way of genuine readings, uncomfortably precise. When she got to me, she held my hands for longer than she had held anyone else's, and she said what she said. And when she moved on, I laughed, and Naomi, sitting 2 seats to my right, in the dress she had bought specifically for the shower, her champagne glass leaving a ring on the tablecloth, laughed too. Well, she said, I'll try not to take that personally. And everyone laughed, and someone poured more champagne, and the moment passed. It passed, and I let it pass. And that is what I cannot forgive myself for some days. Not the betrayal, which was Naomi's to own, but my own decision to let the warning dissolve in laughter and Prosecco rather than sit with it for even one serious moment. Daniel and I moved into the house in early May, 6 weeks before the wedding. We painted the kitchen a pale sage green and bought a new mattress for the bedroom and kept my grandmother's furniture everywhere else, because her furniture was better than anything we could have afforded and because it felt right. The house settled around us in the way that houses do when they have been loved for a long time. Quietly, without drama, breathing. I would stand in the kitchen in the mornings, coffee in hand, watching the light come through the east-facing window and feel something very close to peace. We were in debt from the renovations we planned to do slowly over time, but the house itself was mine, free and clear, and that fact had a solidity to it that nothing in my adult life had previously had. Naomi came by 3 times in those 6 weeks. The first time, she helped us move boxes and stayed for dinner. The second time, she brought a housewarming gift, a set of kitchen towels embroidered with small yellow birds that had been our grandmother's favorite, and walked through the rooms again with that careful, reverent attention I had misread so profoundly. The third time, she came while Daniel was at work, and I was sorting through my grandmother's things in the upstairs bedroom, and she asked if she could look at the blue ring. I remember this moment with a precision that still startles me. I was sitting on the edge of the bed with the cedar box open in my lap, and she was standing in the doorway, and the light was the particular flat white of an overcast afternoon. She asked if she could look at the ring, and I said, of course, and I handed her the envelope, and she took it out and held it up to the window and turned it slowly. It's smaller than I remember, she said. I said, yes, it always seems bigger in memory. She said, Grandma told me once it would be mine. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and then she smiled and handed it back. But obviously she changed her mind, she said easily. And then she asked if I wanted help with the box, and we spent another hour sorting together. And I told myself, I actually consciously told myself, that it was nothing. A misremembering, a wishful thought she had carried from childhood and let go of gracefully. I told myself I had heard the note of grace in her voice, and I believed it. I was wrong about what I had heard. The wedding was on a Saturday in late June. The venue was a converted greenhouse outside the city, all glass walls and climbing roses, with long linen-covered tables and the smell of warm wood and greenery. Daniel was standing at the altar in a charcoal suit, and when I walked toward him, I felt something so large and certain that I did not have words for it, only the physical fact of it, warm and steady in my chest. Naomi stood to my left in the sage green dress we had chosen together, holding a small bouquet of white peonies, and she was smiling, and the smile looked real to me. It looked entirely real. The ceremony was 40 minutes. The dinner was long and warm and full of the particular laughter that happens when people who love the same people find themselves in the same room. Carrie made a toast that made me cry. My father danced badly and enthusiastically to every song. Daniel's parents were formal but kind, and his mother shook my hand with both of hers and said she was glad. Naomi gave a toast that was funny and warm and referenced a specific memory from our childhood, a disastrous camping trip, a collapsed tent, the two of us laughing in the rain. And I listened to it and I thought, whatever the fortune teller saw, she was wrong. Look at this. Look at my sister's face. This is real. I took off the ring I had worn for the ceremony, my grandmother's ring, the blue one, which I had decided to wear as my something old, and placed it in its small envelope in my clutch bag before the dancing started, because I was afraid of losing it in the joy and movement of the evening. I put it in the inside pocket where it would be safe. I checked it twice during the night. The third time I checked, sometime after 11, the pocket was empty. The first cold wash of it was disbelief. I checked every pocket, every seam, the bottom of the bag, the floor beneath my chair, the bathroom counter. I asked the venue staff. I asked Daniel, who helped me look with the focused calm he brought to every problem. I did not, in those first hours, ask Naomi, because it did not occur to me to ask Naomi. She was my sister. She was standing beside me on the dance floor at that moment, her heels off, laughing at something one of Daniel's cousins had said. I did not ask her. The ring was simply gone. We reported it to the venue. We filled out a form. We drove home at 1 a.m. in the strange, flat silence of a perfect day that had ended on a wrong note. And I sat on the edge of our bed in my grandmother's house and felt the absence of the ring like a bruise. Not acute pain, but a deep, spreading ache. Daniel sat beside me and said all the right things, that it was just an object, that my grandmother was not the object, that we would find it or we would not, and either way, nothing essential had been lost. I knew he was right, and I felt it was wrong at the same time, the way you feel things at the end of very long, very full days. I did not sleep well. I lay in the dark and listened to the house, and somewhere around 3 a.m, I thought of the fortune teller's still dark eyes and the way she had said, "Do not invite your sister." And I pushed the thought away so hard and so deliberately that it felt like a physical act. 6 weeks later, I found out the ring had not been lost at all. It was Carrie who told me, and I will be grateful to Carrie for the rest of my life for that. And also furious, not at Carrie, but at the shape of the world in which it was Carrie who had to tell me, rather than the person who should have. Carrie had seen something on Naomi's Instagram, a photograph posted 3 weeks after the wedding and captioned, "Grandma's ring, always with me." The ring in the photograph was a thin gold band with a single oval sapphire, deep blue, with the unmistakable small cloud of inclusion on one side that my grandmother had always called the flaw that made it alive. Carrie texted me the screenshot at 7:43 on a Thursday morning with the message, "I'm sure there's an explanation, but I thought you should know." I was standing in the kitchen with my coffee when the notification came. I read it once, standing up. Then I sat down because my legs had made that decision independently of me. The coffee cup was in my hand, and I put it on the table very carefully, with the slow and exaggerated care of someone who understands that if they move too quickly, something irreversible will happen. I looked at the photograph for a long time. The ring. My grandmother's ring. Naomi's hand. The world had a strange quality in that moment. Not quite real, slightly overlit, the way it gets when something true becomes undeniable and your mind takes a few seconds to accept the new geography. I thought, there has to be an explanation. I thought, she must have found it that night, kept it to return it, forgotten. I thought, she wouldn't. And then I thought, very quietly, the thought that undoes everything before it. But she did. I did not call Naomi immediately. I want to be honest about that because it matters. It is part of the story of who I was before and who I became after. And the distance between those two versions of myself was built, in part, out of the hours I spent sitting very still at that kitchen table, not calling, not texting, not confronting, but simply sitting with the unbearable clarity of what I was looking at. There was a part of me, the part that had been the peacemaker my whole life, the part that had driven my grandmother to appointments and sorted boxes without complaint and smiled at the wedding toast and laughed at the fortune teller's warning. That part wanted to find an explanation. It wanted to construct a story in which Naomi had found the ring on the venue floor, meant to return it, gotten busy, posted the photograph without thinking. It was not a convincing story, but it had the great advantage of being survivable, and I held it in my hands like a cracked cup, aware it would not hold water, but reluctant to put it down. I held it for exactly one day. Then I drove to Naomi's apartment. She lived 20 minutes from the house, in a building with a pale gray lobby and a doorman who knew me by sight. She buzzed me up without asking why I was there, which meant either she had no idea I knew, or she had decided that a confrontation was inevitable and had decided to face it. I did not know which until I stepped through her door and saw her face, and understood immediately that it was the second. She was standing in the middle of her living room, not sitting, not puttering with something in the kitchen, standing as if she had been waiting. She was wearing a gray sweater and her hair was down, and her expression had that particular quality of someone who has rehearsed a scene many times and is now, finally, performing it. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. Not, "I can explain," not, "I was going to call you," just, "I wondered when you'd come," as if she had been waiting for an appointment. I stood in the doorway for a moment. The apartment smelled of coffee and the particular light citrus of her hand lotion, a smell I had known since we were children. I thought, every familiar thing in this room is contaminated now. That is not a dramatic thought. It is a factual one. When trust breaks in a specific direction, it breaks backward through time as well as forward, and everything you knew about the person before the breaking takes on a different color. "Give me the ring," I said. I had not planned those as my first words, but they were the right ones. Everything else was secondary. She tilted her head, the way she always did when she thought I was being unreasonable. "It's not just your ring," she said. "Grandma told me it would come to me. She told me that years ago. You got the house, Sarah. You got everything. The ring was supposed to be mine." "She told me the ring went with the house," I said. "She told me directly." "She told us different things," Naomi said, and her voice was almost gentle, as if this were a clarification rather than an accusation. She was old. She got confused. "You're the one with the will and the lawyer and the whole cleaned-out house, and all I have is her ring, and you're here to take that, too." The word "too" landed with a weight she had not intended to give it. I heard it arrive, and I noted it, the way you note a detail that seems small and turns out to be the load-bearing wall. "Too." As if there was something else she had lost, something she felt I had taken, something beyond the ring that this was actually about. I asked her to give me the ring. She said no. She said it calmly, like someone who has considered their position carefully and decided to hold it. She said, "You'll have to take me to court, Sarah, and you won't, because we're sisters, and you don't want this to become what it would become." She said it without cruelty, which was the worst part. She said it like a fact, like a wall she had calculated I would not climb. And she was right that the old me would not have climbed it. She had known me my whole life, and she was right about who I had been. What she had failed to account for was who I was in the process of becoming, right there, in her gray lobbied apartment, while the citrus of her hand lotion hung in the air between us, and I looked at my grandmother's ring on my sister's hand. I drove home. I sat in my grandmother's kitchen with the sage green walls and the east-facing window, and I thought for a very long time. I thought about the fortune teller's hands around mine. I thought about the third visit Naomi had made to the house, the way she had held the ring up to the window and turned it. I thought about the wedding, the dancing, the clutch bag, the inside pocket that I had checked twice and found empty on the third check. I thought about when, precisely, Naomi had been near my things that evening. I thought about the timeline of the Instagram post, 3 weeks after the wedding, confident enough to photograph it, confident enough to caption it, Grandma's ring, always with me, as if it were already settled, already resolved in her favor by the passage of time and the softness she believed I could not overcome. I called my father that evening, not my mother. My mother would have tried to mediate, to smooth, to find the version of events in which everyone was slightly wrong and slightly right, and everyone could sit down to dinner again someday. My father was not like that. He was quiet and exact, and when I told him what had happened, he listened without interrupting until I finished, and then he said, "You need a lawyer. Not for the divorce. You need an estates lawyer. Call Marcus Webb." He had known Marcus Webb for 30 years. He said, "Tell him about the will. Tell him about the ring. Tell him about the Instagram post. He will tell you exactly what you have." I called Marcus Webb the next morning. He was measured and direct, which I had needed. He said that under the terms of the will, which disposed of the entire contents of the house to me, the ring, which had been physically present in the house at the time of my grandmother's death and was not separately bequeathed, was legally mine. He said the Instagram post was a useful piece of evidence in establishing knowing possession. He said we could send a formal letter demanding return, which was the appropriate first step, and that if it was not returned within a specified period, there were civil remedies available. He said it was straightforward. He did not say it would be easy, but he said it was straightforward, and in that moment, straightforward was everything. The letter went out on a Friday. Naomi received it on Monday. She called me at 8 in the morning, and her voice had changed. The careful calm was gone, and what was underneath it was not grief, but anger, and under the anger, something that took me a moment to identify as fear. "You're really doing this," she said. "You're actually doing this to me." "I'm asking for my grandmother's ring," I said. "That's all I'm doing." "You always got everything," she said, and her voice cracked on the word always in a way that was involuntary, the crack of something that had been under pressure for a long time. "You were her favorite. Everyone knew it. You got all the good years with her. You got to be the one she depended on. And you got the house. And now you want the ring too, and you're using a lawyer to take it from me." She paused. "She loved me too, Sarah. She told me that ring was mine. She told me." I was quiet for a moment. And then I said something that surprised both of us, because it was true. "I know she loved you. I'm not disputing that. I'm disputing the ring. Those are two different things." Another pause. "You could have called me that night. You found it at the venue or in the bag or wherever you found it, and you could have called me. That's the part I can't get past, that you didn't call me, that you kept it for 3 weeks and then photographed it like it was already yours." She had no answer for that. The silence on the phone was a particular kind of silence, not empty, but full, packed with everything she could not say without making it worse. She said she needed time to think. I said I understood. I gave her the deadline in the letter. She did not return the ring within the deadline. What she did instead was escalate in a direction I had not anticipated, which was to contact my mother and present a version of events in which I had hired a lawyer to strip her of the only piece of our grandmother she had ever been given. My mother called me in tears. I drove to my parents' house that same evening and sat at their kitchen table, the same table where I had done homework for 12 years, where the surface was soft in one corner from years of someone resting their elbows. And I told my mother the full story. Not my version, the facts, the will, the ring's legal status, the photograph, the Instagram caption, the timeline. My mother listened to all of it. She was quiet for a long time afterward. Then she said, very quietly, "She told me it was a gift. She said you gave it to her as a wedding gift. She said you wanted her to have it." She looked at me. She told me that 2 weeks after the wedding. The lie was so specific, so deliberate, so entirely constructed. Not, "I found it, I meant to return it, but Sarah gave it to me as a gift, she wanted me to have it," that for a moment I could not speak. It was not the lie itself that took my breath away. It was the architecture of it, the way it had been built with me as its foundation, designed to be unmovable because I was the one who would have to demolish it. To prove it false, I would have to say, "She is lying." And saying that about a sister at a wedding, about a grandmother's ring, was exactly the kind of claim that gets read as cruelty, regardless of whether it is true. My mother looked at me, and I looked at her, and I said, "She is lying." I said it quietly. She took it from my bag at the wedding. I did not give it to her. I have never given her anything of Grandma's. There was nothing left to give because the ring was the only piece she owned, and it is mine. My mother looked at her hands. She was turning her own ring around her finger, a habit she had when she was deciding something. I waited. She said, "I believe you." She said it the way you say things that cost you something real. I don't want to, because it would be easier not to, but I believe you. That was the moment. Not the lawyer's letter, not the Instagram post, not the confrontation in Naomi's apartment. This was the moment the architecture of my sister's plan came apart, because it had been built on the assumption that my mother would not choose between her daughters, that she would triangulate, mediate, smooth, that the lie about the gift would hold because no one would force the question. What Naomi had not calculated was that I would sit at that kitchen table and say, "She is lying," with enough quiet conviction that my mother would believe me, and that my mother's belief would matter more than Naomi had budgeted for. My father drove to Naomi's apartment the next day. I was not there. He went alone, and he told me afterward only that the conversation had been brief and that he had told her she had 2 choices. He did not tell me the details, and I did not ask. My father was a man who believed in the effectiveness of clarity, and I trusted him to have been clear. Naomi returned the ring by courier 3 days later. It arrived in a small padded envelope with no note. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table, and the ring slid into my palm. Thin gold, oval sapphire, the small cloud of inclusion catching the afternoon light exactly the way I remembered. My grandmother's flaw that made it alive. I held it for a long time. I was not crying. I was something past crying, in the territory of things that have moved through grief and arrived somewhere else. The legal matter was formally resolved with a short written acknowledgement from Naomi's side, arranged through Marcus Webb's office, confirming that the ring was my property and that it had been returned. Marcus called it tidy. I called it hollow. But I understood that tidy was what I had been working toward, and that hollow was a separate problem, not a legal one, not a procedural one, but the ordinary human problem of losing a version of your sister you had believed in for 35 years. We did not speak for 4 months. My mother maintained contact with both of us, with the patient sorrow of a woman threading a needle in a moving vehicle. My father said nothing further on the subject. Daniel, and I have not spoken enough about Daniel, who was steady through all of it, who drove me to Marcus Webb's office and waited in the parking lot, who did not say, "Are you sure?" or "Maybe she didn't mean to," but simply said, "What do you need?" and meant it. Daniel was the fixed point I came back to every evening in the house that smelled of cedar and old books, and I think I understood my marriage better after all of it than I had before. Adversity is not a test you study for. It is an exam that shows you what you already knew. The first time I spoke to Naomi was at Christmas. My mother had arranged it with the diplomatic precision of someone who had been quietly preparing for this specific day for months. Naomi and I stood in my parents' kitchen, and it was awkward in the way that real things always are after damage. Not cinematic, but ordinary and slightly painful, like walking on a foot that is no longer broken, but is not yet forgotten. She did not apologize, and I did not demand one. We talked about something small, a television show, a restaurant that had opened near her apartment. We stood on opposite sides of the sink, and we were polite and careful. And when we said goodbye in the doorway, her eyes were bright in a way I did not examine too closely. I do not know what we will become. I have stopped needing to know. That is its own kind of transformation, the relinquishing of the need for a particular outcome, the willingness to let what is unresolved remain unresolved without it eating you alive. The ring is on my right hand now. I wear it most days, not all. I take it off when I garden, which is something I have started doing in the side yard of the house where my grandmother used to grow tomatoes and mint. I am not a gifted gardener, but I am a patient one, and the garden is improving. In the mornings, when the light comes through the east-facing kitchen window and lands on the tablecloth in that particular warm stripe that has not changed in 50 years, I hold my right hand up sometimes and let the sapphire catch it. The small inclusion, the flaw that makes it alive, glows like something private. I think about the fortune teller occasionally. I think about what she saw in the lines of my left hand that made her voice go still and certain. I do not believe she could have known the specifics, the Instagram post, the padded envelope, the kitchen table at my parents' house. But I think she saw something true, that proximity is not the same as loyalty, and that the people closest to our happiness are not always the ones who share it. I should have listened. I know that now. But I also know this. Not listening brought me to the kitchen table with Marcus Webb's business card in my hand, and the courage to say, she is lying, without looking away. And the knowledge, built the hard way, the only way it holds, that I am capable of protecting what matters when it counts. My grandmother knew that about me before I did. She left me the house because she knew. The ring she gave me for the same reason. Not as an object, but as a confirmation. You are the one who stays. You are the one who sees it through. I wear the blue one now, and I know what it means, and I do not need anyone to tell me I deserve it.